Hey everyone, this is Dalton Preen or Maddie D. Preen from Reddit, and I hope everybody is having a good day so far. I'm making this video real quick just to go a bit more in-depth analyzing a position that I posted on the chess subreddit earlier this morning. The position we're going to look at is actually taken from a game I just played yesterday in an over-the-board tournament, and I thought the winning method that I found in the game was really interesting and insightful, so I wanted to analyze the position a bit more, especially since some people had questions about the winning method and if it was even necessary to go for the line that I ended up playing in the game and that I focused on in the Reddit thread. First of all, here's the position, and the title of the thread was "Using an Endgame Advantage, what is the best way for White to play and convert his extra pawn into a win?" So clearly in this position here, White is better. There's no doubt. He's up a pawn right now, 6 pawns versus 5 for Black. Black also has 2 isolated pawns, the A and the C pawns in this position. So definitely White is a bit better in this endgame, no question about that. So in case you didn't come from Reddit or you haven't seen this post that I made, I'll give you the chance here to first of all figure out what White should do here in order to win in the most efficient way possible. So go ahead and pause the video and think about the position, especially if you haven't seen it yet. Go ahead and think about how you would play as White here in order to convert your extra pawn into a win. Now, some people in the thread that I made figured that the most straightforward route to win this endgame was to bring the king to the center, improve the knight, push the pawns on the queen side, create a passed pawn, draw black's king or bishop to defend the passed pawn, and then switch over to attacking the king side or something along those lines. And that answer is not wrong whatsoever. That is a winning method for white. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that in this position. So let me find the FEN bot real quick here. All right, white to play, analysis. Okay, so in this position here, this was the example. And even notice right now, the computer is saying things like, you should play knight c3, you should play king f2. It was just showing a moment ago. This is what, for example, Lichess's Stockfish 8 engine that I have on here right now is recommending. So white could do this. This is one way of winning. White could play something like king f2, king e7, improve the king, black moves up, maybe play knight c3. I'm not going to play exactly what the computer recommends, even though white would just be better here, no doubt. a3, a5, for example. Let me turn off the engine. I don't know. I guess it's fine if I leave it on check. Probably move your king up or something. I'm just making moves that I would, think about making here. Maybe black plays bishop g2. We might play f4. Try to go for knight g5 or knight d6. Something like maybe check and then knight d6. Go for knight f5. Go for knight e8. The computer's recommending bishop f1, but white just goes ahead and wins the pawn. I mean, white is definitely winning here. I'm not going to play out the entire line, but white is winning. There's no doubt about that. So everybody in the Reddit thread that said, just improve your king, push the queen side pawns, improve the knight, it's not wrong. I wasn't ever saying in the thread that that was a wrong method or wasn't winning or anything like that. But if we go back to the beginning, there is actually a more efficient way of winning here. Efficient is how I would describe it, at least. Now, before I go into the other winning method here, let's just kind of talk about why I think it's a little bit more efficient. Because mainly in general in chess, there's always the possibility of complications when there's more pieces on the board. And this goes along with one of the main principles to follow when you're ahead in material. The principle is to trade pieces off the board when you're ahead material. You want to go deeper into the endgame, and that would also be appropriate advice here as well, assuming that white finds the most clear-cut win in the position and plays out the resulting endgame correctly. Now, the interesting thing, like I said, is that the computer here on Lichess recommends king f2 and knight c3 and stuff like that. Let me actually switch the board around here. I'm actually going to turn off the Lichess board. And let's turn on my Fritz 15 board and engine here. So let's switch over to that. So in this example, notice the evaluation that's given in this position. Let me move it around here a little bit. The computer here says that g4 in this position, notice right down here, has a plus 3.32 advantage compared to king f2, which is still winning with a plus 1.95 advantage. So g4 is about a pawn and a half better than playing king f2. Now, in a way, we're kind of picking hairs here a bit. White is still winning if he plays king f2. He's winning if he plays g4, but g4 is the... If you're striving for perfection, I suppose, g4 is the best move in the position. Now, why is g4 the best move, though? Well, the main idea with g4 is that we're simply locking the bishop on h3. We're cutting off its retreat squares, and now the bishop is stuck on h3. It does look like, though, that black can just simply capture the pawn. And it looks like white had an extra pawn, now he's given it up. Now it doesn't look like white's, much better or anything like that. And of course, if you take back on g4 and the bishop takes, well, now the computer does say this is a perfectly even position. But the idea here is that you don't take back on g4. You actually make the move knight f2, and you have kind of, in combination with the g4 move that we played a moment ago, we've kind of trapped the bishop on the h3 square. Now, black here is forced to play the move f5. Notice how the computer has been running for a little bit and it just evaluates everything as completely winning for white. But f5 is pretty much forced here. If black does not play the move f5, if he moves his king or something, then white will simply play pawn takes g4, the bishop's trapped, and white will win easily with an extra piece. So black has to make the move f5 here, or at least any human would make the move f5 here for sure. Now, in this position, there's actually a lot of different ways for white to win. You do still have to be accurate in the king and pawn endgame that will result pretty soon, but there is quite a few ways for white to win here. White can do things like you can take h3 right away. That is one winning method. You can play f4 here. That's another winning method. You can play b4. You can almost in a way do almost anything here. So let's show how each of these methods work out. Well, now let's first look at knight takes h3, since this is, this is actually what I played in the game, and it is winning. Black, of course, takes back. Now, in the game, there's, once again, a couple different ways to win. You can go king f2 immediately, planning to play king g3 and simply pick up the h3 pawn and get your pawn advantage back. You can play f4. You can play b4. All of these are winning methods in the game, or in this position here. Now, the main thing to understand here, though, is kind of being able to look forward in this king and pawn endgame and figure out why this is winning. The main advantage for white here is this pawn majority on the queen side. Whenever you have a pawn majority on the queen side, or, well, on any side of the board pretty much, whenever you have a pawn majority, especially in the endgame, the farther you get into the endgame, you can use that pawn majority to create a passed pawn. So let's say, for example, let's say white and black just don't do anything productive here. Let's just say we move our kings like back and forth, for example, or let's say black just moves his king back and forth. Let's say white plays, I don't know, king. We play b4, black plays king g8. White is going to be able to make a passed pawn by doing something like a4. Again, we're just for the sake of argument, we're just showing how to make the passed pawn. Then you're going to play c5, for example, or actually even b5 is probably working as well. b5, take. Yeah, well, you could take with the a pawn. You've already got your passed pawn here. Two passed pawns almost in this position. Or you could even take back with the c pawn and then play a5, b6, and then this is your passed pawn that's going to promote to a queen. Now, of course, what black should do is not let that happen, but this is kind of one of the main ideas of this endgame, why this wins for white. Black is going to be distracted on, pulling his king towards the queen side in order to prevent white from creating that passed pawn and using that to win easily. While black is over on the queen side, keeping white's pawns under, in check, kind of keeping them, from making the passed pawn easily. White, on the other hand, is going to go on the king side, pick up the h3 pawn, go after the f5 pawn, go after the g7 pawn. White is going to have his king on the king side here, and it's pretty much the principle of two weaknesses. Black is stuck, or the main problems for black is that white's going to create either a passed pawn on the queen side, or white's king is going to do a lot of damage on the king side. The problem for black is that he can't stop both things at the same time. There might be some variations and lines that look like he can do it, but it actually can't be done. So let's say, for example, we just go with the king f2 start. King f2 is one of the winning ways. Now let's say black plays king e7. White goes king g3, for example. White's just going to pick up the h3 pawn. Now there are some small little things you have to be careful about. Let's say black goes king d6. Now you want to make sure that black doesn't just go and pick up all your queenside pawns. So you do kind of want to create a little bit of a fence. You play the move b4, for example. If black tries to wrap around and go to e5 and then d4, well, now you can make this pass pawn. b5, take, the king runs over. White takes on h3, black moves to c5. And the problem is that black is going to spend a whole lot of time going after the a pawn, and white is going to be faster with his kingside pawns here. So let me show what I'm talking about. King g5, king a4. You don't even have to actually take the f pawn. Taking the f pawn is actually a little bit slower. This actually goes into a draw. Instead, you just focus on the g pawn and the h pawn, pushing your h pawn. King here, take, h4, and we're going to promote b4 black will. He plays a5, h5, a4, h6, e3, h7. Even if his king wasn't, well, in this case, you know, he moves his king, you promote, he pushes, and then the nice thing here, you can just go ahead and check. You can just go after the pawn. You can actually sacrifice the queen for the pawn pretty soon. Take the f pawn, and then white wins with his remaining f pawn. Pretty straightforward. Just play king e5, play f4, and black cannot stop the pawn here. f7 and queen. Okay, so obviously that's a lot of stuff we played out here, but mainly showing the idea that black is going to be distracted by a lot of what's going on the queen side. White can even lose a pawn, but white's going to be able to win on the king side in a lot of these scenarios. So let's say black focuses on the king side though. Let's say instead of playing king d6 and king e5 and stuff like that, let's say it plays king f6. Well, white will still push a little bit on the queen side here. If black still goes for e5, we still take h3. Let's say black plays something like g5. We're going to take h3. Black maybe does something like king e5. Again, white can still, the computer's showing, can still go for b5. Take, king d5, a4, for example, king c5, king g3, king b4, and something like h3, take, f4, take, but the nice thing here, white promotes and covers the promotion square at the same time. Push, promote, and you cover the promotion square. So a lot of this is, there's some very fine lines in here for sure. Some very kind of minute details. White sometimes wins by one tempo. However, this is also assuming that white doesn't do anything to prevent the king from, going over there. So the safest line, I would say here, aside from going king g3 and immediately taking the pawn, what I ended up playing in the game was playing f4, king d6, and b4. The important point here is that we set up a bit of a barrier in this position. The c4 pawn and the b4 pawn and the f4 pawn are all kind of fencing the king out. Now we don't even have to worry about that king activity, that king running over and picking up the queenside pawns. As you can see here, the computer still evaluates this as completely winning. So let's say black plays something like c5. We can just play a3. We don't even have to take the pawn. Let's say he goes g6. We just go king g3. The king moves. Take the pawn. The problem for black, again, is that white is just going to go on the king side here while the queen side pawns are under check. And white's just going to win the pawn, push the h pawn. Again, black cannot defend both sides of the board with his king at the same time. Now let's say we go back even further. Let's say black sees this ahead of time, and maybe he wants to play something like a5 and c5 to shut down, or at least think that he's shutting down the queenside pawns. So let's say he goes a5. Well, white can actually still win this with not too much trouble. King g3, king e7, king takes h3. I'm sorry, not king takes h3, actually a3, because you still want to create the b4, the a3, b4, c4 block out. So king d6, b4. If he trades pawns, we always have the ability to make that pass pawn and distract black's king. So maybe he plays king e5. We take the pawn. He goes to d4. We go b5. And this is similar to the winning method in the other earlier. King g3, take king f4, g6, king here. Pick up the g pawn, push the h pawn, and white is clearly winning here. So the main thing here is just kind of being able to look a little bit further ahead in this position and see that white has this overwhelming advantage with the extra pawn on the queen side, plus the fact that black is having trouble defending both sides of the board. the king cannot defend both the queenside pawn, pushing forward past pawn creation, and also defend the king side at the same time. Now let's say black plays a5 and c5. So I'm just going through a lot of different examples of what black can do, what white can do, because I know a lot of people in the Reddit thread kind of came up with some different ideas. So let's say black goes, let's say I go king f2 to start off with. Let's say black goes a5, king g3, and c5. So let's see if this maybe shuts down the queenside pawns. Still take h3, king e7, king g3, king f6, king f4. Maybe black throws in a g5 check. We go back to g3, king e6. The thing here again, though, is that white is going to be able to win on the king side, and he's actually just going to look to trade off or weaken kind of the pawns over here. So we play, for example, f4. Black might play g4. And now we just play king h4, and we're just going to win through some Zugzwang usage here. King f6, king h5. Black wishes he didn't have to move his king, but he has to. He moves the king away. For example, let's say e7. We attack the pawn. He defends it. King g6. Black has to move again. You lose the pawn. You also lose the g4 pawn, and white doesn't even need the queenside pawns in this case. So what if black plays king f6? Maybe he doesn't let white invade easily. Well, white is just going to go ahead and trade pawns. He's going to play h4, king h5, and we're just going to trade off these pawns here. But again, white is closer towards the center of the board, and white is going to win the c pawn, the a pawn, and then his three queenside pawns will win easily there. So I hope you're getting to see, you're kind of understanding that almost anything you do here that follows some kind of basic king and pawn endgame ideas is going to be winning for white. So the reason that I said that this line was like more winning than playing the king f2 and the king e3 stuff at the beginning here is because you have no risk of, there's absolutely no risk of losing, let's put it that way, and there's almost no risk of drawing either. You can only draw if you allow black to get just, allow black to just move his king all the way over and you don't do anything productive in the meantime. So again, g4, he takes knight f2. We'll go back to this real quick. Now let's say after f5, there's another winning method here. Aside from taking the bishop, you could also be a little bit more patient if you want, and you could play f4. Black might play something like king e7. You can now play b4. You don't actually need to be in a rush to take the bishop. This is also a winning method. King d6, and now we go for the trade. Once we've done the b4 and f4 moves, take, king f2, and this just transposes back into the winning lines we looked at earlier. c5, a3, and white's just going to go pick up the h-pawn, move his king up towards attacking the g-pawn. Now let's say he doesn't play c5. Let's say he goes king e6, we go here, king f6, takes, and let's say he plays king g6. He thinks that he's kind of blocking out the white king from advancing on the king side. Well, you can simply go to king g3, king f7, king h4, king g6, something like that. And now again, the problem, the king needs to be on the queen side to some degree. White can just go ahead and work on making that passed pawn. a4, king f6, we advance a little bit, and black is just, he runs out of moves at some point here. If he tries to play king h6, well then this is where the passed pawn creation comes into play. b5, takes, c takes, for example, king b6, a5, create the passed pawn, and black will not be in the square of the pawn to stop it. King f6, b6, takes. Could also just play a6, but taking here, for example, and you promote the pawn. So another method here, you don't even actually have to take the bishop, which is actually kind of funny. You could actually just play like knight d3, for example, and this is still winning for white as well. You're still up that pawn, the bishop is, or you're not up the pawn necessarily, but the bishop's trapped. And you can now, you can still win this position even though you're not actually up a pawn right here. The best method though, at least probably the most precise method I would say that gives black the absolute least amount of counterplay is to do something like b4, stopping c5 and a5, play f4, and then take the bishop, or maybe take the bishop first and then play f4. The main thing that you're wanting to create, or the easiest way to win this, I would say, is making the b4, c4, f4 little pawn fence in a way, keeping the black king from advancing easily. Then white just goes ahead and mops up the h3 pawn, advances his king on the king side. If black stays on the king side, you create the pass pawn on the queen side and win. If black goes toward the queen side, then white just picks up the pawns on the king side. So this is a perfect example of white winning through the use of the principle of two weaknesses. Black's king cannot be on both sides of the board. He can't split himself in half and have half the king on the king side and half the queen on the half the king on the queen side. Just doesn't work that way. So hopefully you guys, especially if you guys answered it or put your comments in the thread, I really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys can see that G4 is more direct and winning more efficiently, I suppose, compared to the move King F2, King E3, and trying to win the minor piece in game. Both are winning, like I said at the start, no doubt both are winning, but G4 is a very nice way of transforming it into a king and pawn in game without the minor pieces, and it's clearly a win for white as long as you have some basic understanding of king and pawn in games, and as long as you also see this this kind of f4, b4, c4 kind of pawn fence, and then white wins pretty easily after that. Okay, so that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I am probably thinking about making this maybe a more consistent thing for videos. I'm thinking about maybe doing some kind of Reddit position analysis every now and then, especially if I see some interesting positions put up on Reddit. Just trying to contribute a bit more to the Reddit community. I've always been a bit of a lurker, but recently I've started posting a little bit more. Hopefully you guys enjoy the content that I'll try to provide as much as I can. And hopefully, if you put some good positions out, maybe I will analyze them in some videos. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I will see you guys around. See you later. Bye-bye.